Every small inconsistency, the blouse, the hand she wrote with, the moods, was a clue I couldn't ignore. I pulled out my old notebook, writing obsessively, noting every strange detail. Leaving for the market at 3 p.m., returning at 6 wearing a blue blouse, seeming rushed. Each observation added fuel to my growing anxiety. I had to understand the truth, no matter how painful. My instincts screamed that someone was hiding something, and I couldn't rest until I knew what. But following her felt like betrayal. Still, when the chance came, I couldn't resist. I slipped quietly into the street behind her, keeping my distance, my heart hammering in my chest. Yet as I turned a corner, she vanished into an alley I had never seen her enter before. My hands shook. Where was she going? Who was she meeting? As I lingered in the shadowed alley, a knot of fear tightening in my chest, I realized I was about to uncover something far more shocking than I could have imagined. And at that moment, I knew life as I knew it was about to change forever. The alley was narrow and dark, the walls on either side stained with age and neglect. My heart pounded in my ears as I hesitated at its entrance. Gripping the family photo in my trembling hands, Matthew's innocent smile flashed in my mind, and I knew I had to find out what Araceli was hiding. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, like the ground itself was warning me to turn back. I paused halfway down the alley, squinting through the dim light. A figure moved in the shadows, someone who looked strikingly familiar, but not quite her. My breath caught. Could it be Araceli? But her blouse was different. A simple white top instead of the floral dress I had seen earlier. Her hair fell the same way, her posture the same. But something was off, an unfamiliar tension in her shoulders. I wanted to call out, to ask her directly, but my voice refused to come. I stayed hidden, my pulse racing. Minutes passed, yet she didn't notice me. Then a sudden sound, a cough, faint but distinct, made me freeze. A second figure appeared from the side, calm and poised, and I realized this was no ordinary encounter. One was timid, almost frightened, while the other seemed quietly authoritative, guiding the first with gentle words. Gathering courage, I approached slowly, clutching the photo like a talisman. The timid woman stiffened as she saw me, her hands gripping a rag as if it could shield her from the world. Araceli? I stammered, my throat dry. Her eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. I'm not, she began, but the words trailed off. From behind her, the other woman stepped forward. She was composed and intelligent, with a calmness that contrasted sharply with the nervousness of the one in front. Mrs. Brooks, she said softly, yet firmly, my name is Lucy. I think it's time you knew the truth. My pulse quickened as I glanced between them. Something had been hidden from me, and I felt the first thread of a terrible understanding forming. The timid woman finally lowered her gaze, tears brimming in her eyes. I'm Isadora, she whispered. The name sounded foreign, yet hauntingly familiar. I blinked, struggling to comprehend. Not Araceli? I asked, my voice barely audible. She shook her head, unable to meet my eyes. Lucy began to explain, her voice steady. Isadora had been forced into this role, pretending to be Araceli at times. She hadn't wanted to, but desperation had left her no choice. Her parents were ill, and the money Araceli had offered was all that could save them. Every inconsistency I had noticed, the sudden mood swings, the changes in behavior suddenly made sense. It wasn't magic or madness. It was a carefully orchestrated deception, one designed to hide secrets. I was only beginning to glimpse. The weight of the revelation crushed me. Could Araceli really be capable of such manipulation? And more importantly, where did that leave my son and my grandson? The room seemed to spin. My legs were weak, but I forced myself to sit. I needed answers, and I needed them now. And then Lucy said a single sentence that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Brooks, you're going to want to see the papers. It's worse than you think. Lucy led me to a small corner of the cramped room, where a thin, frail man lay on a cot, coughing weakly under a threadbare blanket. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, mingling with the tension that made my chest ache. Isadora stood quietly beside him, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the rag she had held when I first arrived. Her face was almost identical to Araceli's, but her expression was one of fear and sorrow, not confidence or entitlement. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "Isadora, tell me everything," I said. Her lips quivered and she lowered her eyes. I never wanted to hurt anyone," she whispered. "I just needed to help my parents. That's all." Lucy nodded beside her, confirming her story. She explained that years ago, Araceli had noticed Isadora in a market and had seen a way to use her resemblance. Araceli had offered money for her to act as her double, to handle the family's daily life for short periods while she pursued other ambitions. Every detail I had found strange over the months suddenly clicked into place. The inconsistent moods, the moments when Araceli seemed almost absent, and the way my grandson Matthew sometimes hesitated around her. None of it had been random. It was all part of a plan, Araceli's plan. And now I understood the terrible consequences it had caused. I glanced at the photo. I had brought the one of Araceli smiling with Stephen and Matthew, and my chest tightened. Could it really be possible that two women, identical in appearance, had been living such different lives, and that one had been used to deceive my family? I felt a mixture of anger and sorrow, a swirling storm of emotions I could not contain. Then Lucy added another shocking piece. Araceli had been seen traveling abroad, meeting a wealthy man named Charles Thompson. She had been leading a secret life, one that her family had no idea about. The puzzle pieces of my son's confusion, Matthew's fear of Araceli's unpredictable behavior, and the mysterious gaps in her story all fell into place in a way that was almost too cruel to accept. Sank into a chair, my mind spinning. Isadora's trembling form, her quiet tears, the desperate love for her parents. Everything spoke of innocence forced into complicity. She wasn't the villain. Araceli was. And the truth was going to shake my family to its core. I knew. I couldn't leave without answers, and I couldn't stay silent. My son and grandson deserved the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I clasped Isadora's hands gently. "I promise I won't let anyone else hurt you, but I need you to help me bring this to light." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, relief and fear intertwined. Just as I thought I had finally grasped the situation, Isadora whispered something that made my stomach drop. "Mrs. Brooks, there's one thing Araceli told me never to reveal, and it's about Matthew." That night I lay awake, unable to stop thinking about Isadora's words. The shadows in my room seemed heavier, pressing down like the weight of the secret I was about to uncover. Matthew slept peacefully in the next room, oblivious to the storm gathering around his family. My mind kept replaying every moment with Araceli. The sunny smiles, the sudden coldness, and the inconsistencies in her stories. Each memory now carried a hidden meaning, and each glance at Isadora reminded me that my family had been living a lie for far too long. The next morning, I decided to visit the alley again, the place where the tangled threads of this mystery had first begun to unravel. The market was bustling, the sun warming my shoulders, but inside I felt a cold knot of anxiety. I approached the small house at number 14, the one with peeling paint and a single pot of wilted flowers on the windowsill. I knocked firmly, my heart thundering in my chest. Isadora answered, calmer this time, though her eyes still held a flicker of fear. "Mrs. Brooks," she said softly, stepping aside. "Come in. We need to finish what we started." Inside, Lucy handed me a worn envelope with Isadora's adoption, papers and a copy of her birth certificate. Reading the documents, my heart nearly stopped. Isadora and Araceli, the same birth date. Could it be possible? Twins separated at birth, one raised in comfort, the other struggling to survive. I felt a mix of shock, sorrow, and a strange sense of inevitability. Every question I had harbored over the past months suddenly had an answer. Every inconsistency, every confusing moment, every flicker of doubt in Araceli's behavior, everything pointed to the same truth. My daughter-in-law had a secret life, and Isadora had been forced into it. Isadora broke the silence. I wanted to tell Stephen, to tell Matthew, but Araceli warned me never to speak. She said it would ruin everything, and she would make sure my parents suffered if I did. Her voice trembled, but there was a strength in her eyes I had never noticed before. Lucy nodded beside her. "We can't undo the past," she said gently, "but you can start making it right. The family deserves the truth." I left that alley feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. The next day, I began preparing for a family dinner, one that would change everything. I set the table with care, lighting candles and cooking Stephen's favorite dishes. My hands shook, but I forced myself to focus. Tonight, the truth would finally come out, and nothing would ever be the same. When the evening came, the family gathered around the table. Araceli arrived, calm but nervous, and Matthew smiled innocently, unaware of the storm about to hit. I signaled to Ivan, who had returned from his trip, and Isadora stepped in behind him, her face identical to Araceli's, but filled with anxiety and courage. The room went silent. Matthew's innocent question cut through the tension. "Grandma, why are there two moms?" Araceli froze, her face draining of color, and in that instant, I realized this confrontation would reveal not just lies but a betrayal that could shatter our family forever. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Stephen's face turned pale, his hands frozen midair, and Matthew's small eyes grew wide with confusion. Araceli's calm smile had vanished, replaced by a flash of panic that barely concealed the fury simmering inside her. I took a deep breath, steadying my shaking hands, and said in a firm, unwavering voice, "Araceli, it's time to tell the truth." Her first reaction was denial. "What are you talking about?" "This is ridiculous." "You're making up stories to humiliate me." Her voice cracked as she tried to assert control over the room. But Ivan, calm yet resolute, placed a thick stack of papers on the table. "Your electronic passport. The stamps prove what I told you. Mom, you can't be at home and flying to France at the same time." He looked directly at her, his jaw tight, eyes unyielding. Matthew tugged at my sleeve, his voice small and trembling. "Grandma, some days Mom is nice, and other days, she's mean. I don't like the mean mom." His words hit like a dagger. I swallowed hard, feeling my chest tighten, but I could see the clarity forming in Stephen's eyes. He had been blind to this duplicity for too long, but the proof was undeniable. Araceli's expression shifted from anger to shock as the evidence settled in. Her eyes darted between Stephen, Ivan, and me, searching for any escape, any lie she could use. But before she could respond, Lucy stepped forward. Her calm but piercing gaze swept across the room. "I saw Araceli with Charles Thompson," she said steadily. "It was she who hired Isadora to impersonate her, to deceive the family. She wanted to live a life she thought she deserved, without consequences." Araceli's face twisted with fury and panic. Her voice, once soft and calculated, erupted. "Yes, it's true. I'm tired of this life. I'm sick of being trapped in this house. Charles gives me everything I've ever wanted. And you, Stephen, you're nothing to me." Her words detonated like a bomb, leaving Stephen frozen, Matthew crying into my shoulder, and me with a broken heart. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. This confrontation wasn't about punishing Araceli, it was about protecting Stephen and Matthew and revealing the truth about the twin secret that had caused so much confusion and pain. Isadora, standing quietly nearby, finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but carried a strength that filled the room. "Sister, you didn't need to hurt them. I only wanted to help, but I never expected this." Araceli glared at her twin. The resemblance undeniable, but she had no words to counter the truth. She turned sharply and left, the door slamming behind her with a sound that echoed like a final verdict. The room felt hollow, the air thick with tension and heartbreak. We sat there in silence, absorbing the destruction left in her wake. And as the door clicked shut, I realized this was only the beginning. The aftermath of Araceli's betrayal would test our family in ways we had not ever imagined. The next few days felt like a fog had settled over our home. The laughter that once filled the halls was gone, replaced by a heavy silence that clung to every corner. Stephen buried himself in work, his hands always busy but his eyes distant, staring into nothing. Matthew, confused and heartbroken, wandered the house looking for the mother he had loved some days and feared on others. I stayed close to them, trying to be the anchor in the storm, holding back my own grief to be strong for my son and grandson. Amid this chaos, Isadora quietly became a part of our lives. She didn't rush, didn't try to replace anyone, but her presence was gentle and calming. She cooked warm meals for us, played with Matthew, and even helped Stephen organize his work papers, her intelligence and kindness slowly restoring a sense of normalcy. Every time Matthew laughed at one of her silly jokes or snuggled close while she read to him, I felt the first flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, life could return to some sense of balance. One evening, while cleaning the kitchen, I noticed Matthew staring out the window, clutching a small drawing he had made. "Grandma," he said softly, "Isadora, can you teach me to draw a little bird again?" His words made my heart ache and smile at the same time. Isadora crouched down beside him, her face lighting up. "Of course, my little artist. But you must draw it so beautifully that it can fly straight into your dreams," she said, laughing gently. The sound filled the room like music, and for the first time in days, I allowed myself to breathe. Stephen watched from the doorway, his eyes softening as he saw Matthew's innocent joy. I could see the weight of Aricelli's betrayal slowly lifting as he witnessed the genuine care and warmth Isadora brought to our home. There was no pretense, no hidden motives, just a pure heart devoted to our family's happiness. Even the house, which had felt heavy with tension, seemed to lighten in her presence. But amidst this fragile peace, I knew we couldn't ignore what had happened. Aricelli had left, but the echoes of her lies and the secret of the twins would continue to linger. One night, as I sat on the porch watching the wind rustle the garden, I realized the truth was a double-edged sword. It had freed us, but it had also exposed wounds that would take time to heal. And yet I couldn't ignore the sense of relief. Finally, there was someone in our family who would care for Stephen and Matthew with sincerity. Someone who wasn't hiding behind lies or secrets. As I turned to go inside, I felt a quiet determination rise within me. We had survived the storm, but the journey wasn't over. Aricelli might have fled, but justice, healing, and love were still ours to reclaim. I knew that with Isadora by our side, we had a chance to rebuild what had been broken, stronger than ever before. But little did we know, the past had a way of catching up, and one unexpected message would soon shake the fragile peace we had fought so hard to create. The next morning started like any other, with the sunlight streaming through the windows and Matthew's laughter echoing in the hallway. But the calm was fragile, like the surface of a pond hiding turbulent currents underneath. I was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when a soft chime from my phone startled me. A message from an unknown number appeared on the screen. It simply read, "You think it's over? Think again." My hands froze, the knife in my hand trembling. I read it again, hoping it was some prank. But the words carried a weight that made the blood drain from my face. Immediately showed it to Stephen. His expression hardened as he read the message, his jaw tightening. "Mom," he said, "someone knows about Aricelli. Maybe even about Isadora. We need to be careful." Matthew, unaware of the storm gathering outside our door, continued drawing at the table, blissfully innocent. I hugged him tightly, feeling a pang of fear for the life we were trying to protect. Whoever had sent that message knew enough to threaten us, and I had no idea who it could be. Over the next few days, subtle changes began. Small things out of place, the faint smell of perfume that wasn't Isadora's. Footsteps echoing in the hallway when no one was there. It was as if Aricelli's shadow still lingered, watching, waiting. Every time the phone buzzed, my heart jumped, fearing another cryptic message. Isadora noticed the tension but didn't ask questions. She simply continued being herself, offering smiles, warmth, and a sense of normalcy that kept Matthew grounded. One afternoon, as I was going through some old family letters, a small envelope fell out of the drawer. The handwriting was familiar, Aricelli's. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, there were photos of Isadora and Aricelli together as children, and a note that simply said, "You're too close. Don't ruin everything I've built." I felt my chest tighten. Aricelli had not just fled. She had been planning all along, and her manipulations were far from over. The realization made every joyful moment with Isadora and Matthew feel fragile, as if we were balancing on a tightrope over a dark abyss. That night, I sat with Stephen and Isadora in the living room. "We can't let her control us anymore," I said, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. "We have Matthew, we have each other, and we have the truth on our side. But we need to be vigilant. Aricelli is clever, and she won't stop until she thinks she's won." Isadora nodded, her eyes firm yet filled with concern. Stephen clenched his fists, his anger simmering beneath the surface. We all understood that life had changed. The battle had not ended. It had only entered a new, dangerous phase. As I tucked Matthew into bed that night, he whispered, "Grandma, will everything be okay?" I kissed his forehead, forcing a smile. "Yes, my love, everything will be okay. We have each other, and we're strong." But deep down, I knew the storm wasn't over, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the next twist would come, sooner than we expected. Just as I thought we could finally breathe, a knock at the door in the dead of night promised a revelation that would turn everything upside down. The knock at the door came just as the clock struck midnight. My heart leapt into my throat, and I felt Matthew stir in his sleep, sensing the tension in the room. Stephen and Isadora froze, exchanging worried glances. I tiptoed to the door, gripping the handle as though it were the only thing holding me steady. When I opened it, no one was there, just a small envelope lying on the welcome mat. I bent down, picked it up, and felt a chill crawl up my spine. The handwriting was unmistakable. Araceli, inside. The envelope was a single photo, folded neatly. I opened it with trembling fingers. It showed Isadora and Areli as toddlers, smiling under the bright sun. Their faces almost mirror images of each other, but in the corner of the photo, scribbled in a sharp, hurried hand, were the words, "She doesn't belong here. She's mine to control." My blood ran cold. Araceli's obsession wasn't just about money or status. It was personal. She had never stopped seeing Isadora as a pawn, a tool for her schemes. Stephen read the note over my shoulder, his face paling. "Mom, she's watching us," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Isadora's lips pressed into a thin line, and I could see her internal struggle. She wanted to reassure us, to show confidence, but the threat was real, and it cut deep. We realized in that moment that Araceli's manipulations weren't in the past. They were ongoing, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The next day, I began taking precautions. Locks were checked, cameras installed, and a careful eye kept on every unusual detail. Yet even in this hypervigilance, life tried to continue. Matthew's laughter filled the house again, and Isadora's gentle touch reminded us of the warmth we fought to protect. But every time I glanced at her, I couldn't shake the sense that we were all walking a tightrope over a chasm of lies and betrayal. Every misstep could awaken Araceli's fury. Then, unexpectedly, a stranger called. The voice was calm but urgent. "Mrs. Brooks, I believe you need to know something about Araceli and her plans. It's important that we meet, tonight." I froze, heart racing. Stephen gripped my shoulder. "Mom, it could be a trap," he cautioned. But I couldn't ignore the possibility that this was the break we needed to finally confront the truth. As evening approached, I prepared to leave, ensuring Matthew was safely asleep with Isadora by his side. The quiet of the night contrasted sharply with the storm brewing inside me. The thought of meeting someone who might have information on Araceli both terrified and excited me. Was this finally the chance to untangle the web of lies? Or were we walking straight into another of her traps? Little did I know. The meeting that night would reveal a secret far darker than any of us could have imagined, and would change the course of our family, Illy forever. Night had fallen when I arrived at the designated meeting place, a quiet, dimly lit cafe on the edge of town. The neon sign flickered above the door, casting a pale glow over the empty street. I hesitated for a moment, my hand on the door, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down. Every instinct screamed that danger was near, yet a part of me knew this was the only way to uncover the next layer of Araceli's deception. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of coffee and polished wood. A man in a dark coat sat at a corner table, a briefcase at his side. His posture was tense, and his eyes flicked nervously to the door. I approached cautiously. "Mrs. Brooks?" he asked in a low voice. I nodded. "I have information about Araceli, but it's not safe to discuss here." He slid a folder across the table. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were photographs, documents, and notes. Evidence of Araceli's financial manipulations, secret trips abroad, and even recorded conversations. One folder contained shocking information about her ongoing plan to control not just her life, but everyone around her. My eyes widened as I saw a list of names, including mine and Isadora's, marked with dates and strange codes. Araceli had been meticulous. Every step she took was calculated, every lie layered with precision. The man leaned closer, his voice urgent. "She's planning something bigger. Mrs. Brooks, Isadora's resemblance is only part of it. She has allies we don't know about, and she intends to use this family's trust against you." My stomach churned, and I gripped the folder tightly, feeling a mix of fear and anger. How could someone be so cruel? So determined to manipulate, not only her family, but also an innocent. young woman who had already suffered so much. Returning home that night, I felt a heaviness settle over me. I carried the folder into the living room, where Isadora was quietly reading with Matthew. She looked up and smiled faintly. "Did you find out anything?" she asked. I nodded, my face pale, and handed her the folder. As she flipped through the documents, tears welled up in her eyes. "She planned this all along. She never stopped seeing me as a tool," she whispered. My heart ached. But I knew we had the upper hand now. We had the knowledge. Araceli had tried so hard to conceal. The next morning, I called Stephen and Ivan. We discussed every detail, every possible move Araceli could make, and laid out a strategy to protect Isadora, Matthew, and ourselves. It was a delicate balance. Acting too soon could tip her off, yet waiting too long could allow her to strike. Every step forward felt like walking through a minefield, and then came the call that made my blood run cold. The same calm, cold voice I had dreaded. "Mrs. Brooks, I see you've discovered some of my little games. But games have consequences." The line went dead. My hands trembled. Araceli had returned, not physically, but her presence was inescapable, looming over us like a storm about to break. We knew she was close, but we didn't yet understand the lengths she would go to, and that night would mark the beginning of a confrontation, more dangerous than anything we had faced before. The following evening, a storm rolled in, mirroring the turmoil inside me. The wind rattled the windows, and the distant rumble of thunder felt like a warning. I stayed close to the living room, the folder of Araceli's secrets clutched tightly in my hands. Stephen and Ivan sat nearby, speaking in low voices, plotting our next move. Matthew, oblivious to the tension, played quietly with his toys, his laughter an innocent melody against the storm outside. But I knew the calm wouldn't last. At precisely 9 p.m., a soft knock echoed through the house. My heart leapt into my throat. No one except family knew we were awake. I glanced at Stephen and Ivan, both frozen and intense. I crept toward the door, careful not to make a sound. When I opened it, no one was there, only a small envelope resting on the welcome mat. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, and deliberate. I swallowed hard and picked it up. Inside was a single card with a chilling message. "You think you know me, but you've only seen shadows. Meet me tomorrow, alone at the old pier. Come or lose everything." I felt the blood drain from my face. Araceli had dared to reach into our lives directly, knowing we couldn't ignore her. My mind raced. Was this a trap? Could she have planned something worse than we imagined? Yet a part of me understood that ignoring it wasn't an option. Every instinct screamed danger, but I had to act. For Matthew, for Isadora, for Stephen. The next morning, I explained everything to Isadora. Her face was pale, but she nodded slowly. "I'll stay home with Matthew," she said. "You need to go. You're the only one she might believe won't back down." My chest tightened, and I hesitated. I didn't want to leave my grandson, but Isadora's words carried the weight of truth. I had to face Araceli myself. That night, the rain fell in sheets as I approached the abandoned pier. Shadows stretched across the cracked boards, and the water churned beneath, reflecting flashes of lightning. My hand trembled as I stepped closer, the envelope burning in my pocket like a warning. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, elegant, her eyes sharp and cold. Araceli. She smiled, but it was the smile of a predator, not a family member. "You came," she said softly, almost mockingly. "I wondered if you had the courage." I took a deep breath, holding the folder tightly against my chest. "I know everything, Araceli. All your lies, all your games. It ends tonight." Her laughter rang out, a sound that made the air itself feel tense. "You think you understand me, Stella, but understanding isn't the same as control." The wind howled, the waves crashed below, and a dangerous silence fell between us. I knew that in this confrontation, only one of us could emerge with the upper hand. Every word she spoke, every movement she made, could tip the scales in a moment. And yet, deep inside, I felt a spark of courage. For Matthew, for Stephen, for Isadora. I couldn't let her continue, destroying everything we loved. Storm raged around us, but the real danger was what Araceli had planned next. And I realized, with a shiver down my spine, that her ultimate move was more devastating than I could have ever imagined. The pier felt like a stage set for a storm, every gust of wind adding weight to the tension between Araceli and me. She took a step closer, her eyes glinting with a mixture of anger and amusement. "Do you really think you can stop me, Stella? After everything I've done?" I squared my shoulders, gripping the folder tighter. "I don't want to fight you, Araceli. I want the truth, and I want my family safe. You've caused enough pain." She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. Then, without warning, she lunged, trying to snatch the folder from my hands. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding. The storm seemed to respond to her fury. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating her furious expression. "You always think you're smarter than me," she hissed. "But you don't know how far I'll go." I backed up toward the edge of the pier, my mind racing. I couldn't let her control the situation, not now. Then I remembered something Ivan had said earlier about her tendency to underestimate me when I acted calmly. Taking a deep breath, I locked eyes with her. "Araceli, this ends tonight, one way or another. I won't let you hurt Matthew, Stephen, or Isadora anymore. And if you try, everyone will know every secret you've tried to hide." Her face twitched, a flicker of uncertainty passing through her eyes. That brief hesitation was all I needed. I pressed forward, stepping firmly onto the pier, refusing to back down. The wind battered us both, but my determination grew with every step. "You can't manipulate everyone forever," I said, my voice steady despite the storm. "The truth is stronger than your lies." For a long moment she said nothing. The rain soaked through our clothes, and the waves crashed loudly against the pier's supports. Finally she spoke, her voice lower now, almost fragile. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what I can do." I held my ground. "I don't need to know everything. I just need to protect my family, and for that, I will do whatever it takes." Her eyes narrowed. And then, just as suddenly as the storm had begun, she turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness, leaving only the echo of her footsteps on the wet boards. I sank to my knees, drenched and exhausted, the folder clutched to my chest. I realized then that Araceli's reign over our lives was over, but the path to healing had only just begun. I walked home through the drenched streets. My mind returned to Matthew's innocent face, Isadora's steady support, and Stephen's quiet strength. I knew the days ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in weeks I felt hope. My family wasn't perfect, but it was real, and the truth had survived the storm. Yet even as I returned home, drenched and exhausted, a nagging thought unsettled me. What if Araceli wasn't finished? What if the storm she brought wasn't over yet, and the real danger was still lurking in the shadows? The next morning, the sun rose gently, washing the city in a soft golden light. For the first time in weeks, the house felt calm, almost peaceful. Stephen was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, humming a quiet tune, while Matthew raced around in his little superhero cape, laughing with a carefree joy that had been missing for so long. I watched them from the doorway, my heart swelling with relief. The storm had passed, and though the memories of Araceli's betrayal still lingered like shadows, I knew we had survived the worst. Isadora was in the living room, kneeling beside Matthew as she helped him build a small model airplane. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, her eyes warm and full of reassurance. She had become more than a friend or a temporary stand-in. She had become family. And in that moment, I understood that sometimes love and courage come from the most unexpected places. We spent the day together, sharing meals, laughter, and stories. Even Stephen, who had been quiet and withdrawn, began opening up, talking about his work and his dreams for the future. Matthew, with his endless questions and boundless energy, brought light into every corner of the house. And as I watched them, I realized something important. The truth had freed us, but it was love and trust that would rebuild what had been broken. That evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. I held Matthew's hand and looked at Isadora, who returned my gaze with a quiet, understanding smile. "Thank you for staying," I whispered, almost to myself, "for helping us heal." She simply nodded, her presence a reminder that goodness and sincerity can triumph even in the darkest times. Life slowly returned to a rhythm that was simple, yet full of meaning. Stephen and Isadora's relationship grew stronger with each passing day, and Matthew's laughter became a constant melody in our home. We all knew the scars of the past would remain, but they no longer controlled us. The family we had chosen, bound by truth, resilience, and love, was stronger than any deception could ever be. And so, as the sun set behind the red roses in the yard, I sat on the porch feeling the gentle breeze on my face. The house was filled with warmth and the sounds of life, a reminder that even after betrayal, even after lies and heartbreak, a new beginning is always possible. Courage, truth, and love had guided us through the storm, and now we were free. Life will always test us, but it's how we face the truth that shapes our future. If this story inspired you or reminded you of the strength that lies within, family and courage, don't forget to subscribe and share, because sometimes sharing one story can light the way for someone else. Thank you for being part of this journey, and remember, courage always leads to better days.